Boys, is it fair that you've got teams like we saw Venezuela hold Argentina away, teams like that you know in any other qualification group would certainly make more of a fist of it than they are in CONMEBOL? Do things need to change?
Yeah, I've said that before on this very sofa, that I think World Cup qualifying throughout you have some guaranteed spots in each confederations, but there need to be more cross-confederation playoffs. But I don't see that changing.
Gab, why are you giggling? Why is Gab giggling?
I see.
No, because I'm with Shaka on the cross-confederation playoffs. That's great, although that will realistically mean that some confederations are going to be entirely shut out. But it's funny because I'm going from memory. Most people were totally incensed and offended by the 48-team World Cup and diluted quality and all this other stuff. And now we're complaining that 5 of the 10 teams in South America aren't going to qualify. They're not going to be at the World Cup, but is it unfair to Venezuela or Chile or whomever? I'm like, you can't really have it both ways.
But why not? Why can't you have the best teams? Why can't you have the 32 best teams in the world at the World Cup?
Because they're dotted all over the globe, and then they don't all play each other. It's as simple as that. And having intercontinental playoffs are great and all, and they're excited. But the fact of the matter is, that's not a great way to determine who's better either, because a lot can happen over 180 minutes. If you want the 32 best teams in the World Cup, Dan, the way you do it is get a bunch of nerds in a room, have them figure out the absolute best possible FIFA ranking that you can come up with, and then just invite those 32 teams to the World Cup.
No, I disagree, Gab. First of all,
I know the nerves as well.
You earn your right to play in the World Cup, right? The reason you play games is to figure out who's best, and you play those games to qualify. Now, just put it down to a mathematical formula. Regardless, it comes down to games. So I have no problem with there being a cross-confederation playoffs. And just because you prefer to have cross-confederation playoffs in a 32-team World Cup, I don't see how that somehow negates the validity or the fact that a 48-team World Cup is going to be watered down. They aren't mutually exclusive.
Well, we're talking about two different things.
Yeah, no, but you brought them up in the same sentence.
You have no. But Shaka, understand. If you have playoffs, you have deserving teams, and I have no argument with you that if you can't beat somebody else over 180 minutes, you don't deserve to go. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are the worst of the two teams, because maybe you have a bad day, maybe a bad referee, whatever. If Dan was talking, why can't we have the 32 best teams in the World Cup? Well, the way you measure 32 best teams of the World Cup is over time. Not over 2 leg playoffs. And that's why this 32 teams in the world, best teams in the World Cup, to me, is a non-starter.
So, Gab, what is the point of having FIFA rankings then? Because it seems the simplest thing would be the top 32 teams in the world qualify. That would seem pretty simple.
I completely agree. If you want to have the 32 best teams in the World Cup, if that is your goal, then that's what you should do.
Where do you stand on this, Craig? You're very quiet.
Oh, well, I'm listening to the boys. I'm more worried about watching all these daubers at the bottom. The Liechtensteins and all these getting absolutely walloped every week. I think there's more concern. I think FIFA are more worried about appeasing these smaller nations than they are about actually making the World Cup as good as it can be. I mean, it's this whole diluting argument again about the 24-team Euros that we had from UEFA, now the 48-team World Cup that's going to come forward. I've got no problem either with the cross-confederation games. I think the issue here, FIFA don't want to have a percentage diluted from certain qualifying regions, right? They want to make sure it's fair for everybody. But as Shaq said, when it comes down to it, it's got to be over a game. If you're not good enough to have 5 teams in from one section of qualifying, then if it's only 2 from CONMEBOL or 2 from CONCACAF or whatever, then that's the way it is.
But a couple of things. First of all, I think FIFA has a responsibility to everybody. The Liechtensteins, the Trinidad and Tobagos, the St. Lucias, everybody. But it's up to the confederations to structure those playoffs, your World Cup playoff systems, to what suits you geographically as a confederation as a whole, to both the big nations and the small. So you mentioned this earlier in the week. I have no problem with there being playoffs to get into those main playoffs as in UEFA. That's how CONCACAF does it with the smaller nations. That's not an issue. But the thing is with the cross-confederation playoffs, why I think it's a non-starter, because you'll be asking the likes of the powerful confederations like UEFA to give up automatic spots to put them into a playoff, which they won't do. No. CONCACAF will be a little bit tentative because they will sit and think, well, do we really want to give up 1 or 2, or 1.5 spots? And we're not quite sure who we're going to get. Maybe we join one of the big European nations. We prefer to play it safe here. And the only losers are confederations like CONMEBOL, who have 10 genuinely strong nations and 5 guaranteed spots, or 4.5 spots. And it becomes a political game which I don't think, as I mentioned, the rich and powerful are willing to gamble with.
It's never going to change. As
long
as we have the confederation set up.
Go ahead, Gab.
No, I was just saying that's part of the reason why they're expanding it to a 48-team World Cup, because a lot of people feel that way. If you have a 48-team World Cup, you will almost definitely have the 32 best teams in the world in it.
But you won't, Gab. You won't, Gab.
You won't have the 32 best teams in the World Cup if you have 48 teams there.
Well, because you won't have all 10 teams from South America.
The other thing where I strongly disagree with this...
You'll have 7 of the 10 teams.
But there's still 3 missing, Gab.
How many you want? Just abolish qualifying then.
But you can't come out and make a statement and then realise that it's not right.
Hold on.
But first of all, I don't have the FIFA rankings in front of me. It's not clear to me that the 8th best team in South America is among the 32 best in the world.
48 is what you said. 48 is what you said.
Yes, if you have a 48-team World Cup, you will have 7 South American teams, and you will most likely have the 32 best teams in the world among those 48. At the same time, you're going to have more daubers, as Burley calls them, from around the world. So you're going to have different confederations represented. Because guess what? The World Cup isn't just about establishing who the best team in the world is. Because if you're going to do that, we might as well just invite 8 teams, just have them play each other 4 times, and just do it that way. The World Cup is also about giving exposure and promotion and making it inclusive about different parts of the world. They're trying to strike a balance there.
Here's the other thing. I disagree strongly with this. Top teams according to the FIFA rankings. One's because it's subjective, and I believe you earn the way into a major tournament. Secondly, and let's use Mexico as an example. Mexico, the highest ranked team in CONCACAF. How do Mexico continue to climb the rankings? Or if you're outside that top 32 or 48, as it may be, how do you climb into those top rankings? Now, Mexico play against other teams primarily within CONCACAF. So you're not going to get huge bumps because you're playing everybody who are below you. You go through Mexico's schedule over the last couple of years. They played a couple of games in the build-up to a couple of European teams in the build-up to the Confederations Cup. But outside of that, they played one European nation, Belarus, in the 2 years since the World Cup. How are Mexico supposed to continually climb the world rankings if they don't play European nations who are rank higher than them? And those European nations, again, have no incentive to play teams from outside their own confederation who are lower than them. So again, it just comes down to politics, which it has to come down. It has to come down to games. You can't start worrying about mathematical formula and what the FIFA rankings are.
Let us know when you've
and this
thought
from a
all
rocket
this out.
scientist, eh?